Members of the Tennessee Valley Civil War Roundtable loaded up the bus and left the parking lot of the U.S. Space and Rocket Center at 7 a.m. Saturday, September 21st. When we had passed Scottsboro and were traveling northeast on US 72, our tour guide, General John Scales, began to set up the Battle of Chickamauga. He explained how the Union's Army of the Cumberland, under the command of General William Rosecrans, and the Confederate Army of Tennessee, led by General Braxton Bragg, came to clash near a narrow creek in northwest Georgia.
His forces down here in the area from where we are now, Belfont over there where the nuclear plant is, all the way up to opposite of Chattanooga. Now he spent the next 8 weeks bringing supplies in, repairing the railroad, and setting up for the next campaign. And that, of course, is the Chickamauga campaign. Now, I did hand out a map, and on one side of it you can see the Tullahoma campaign and the various arrows there for the Tullahoma campaign. And the armies ending up down here in August. Rosecrans then controlled this whole area right here, whereas Bragg was in Chattanooga and around there. Bragg didn't leave anybody but partisans back on this side of the river. They were all on the south side or southeast side of the Tennessee River. Okay, that occupied, again, only 1 week of active campaigning. Now, does anybody remember how many casualties the Federal Army had in gaining almost 100 miles of ground? The total killed, wounded, and missing of the Federal Army in moving almost 100 miles, if I remember correctly, was 871 casualties, because there was no pitched battle. So okay, as I say, Rosecrans consolidated down here for about 8 weeks. Bragg kept his people around Chattanooga. He had Wheeler's cavalry was supposed to be screening the river crossings all the way down to Guntersville. However, Wheeler felt like that his cavalry had undergone so much pressure in the Tullahoma campaign that most of his cavalry was over in Wills Valley all the way down to Rome, Georgia, trying to build up their horses and take care of their horses. There was only one regiment of cavalry to cover 60 miles of river. Forrest also had a cavalry corps. His mission was to cover north of Chattanooga all the way up to near Knoxville, where there were Confederate forces under Buckner, Lieutenant General Buckner, at Knoxville. So the entire river was covered all the way from Knoxville to Guntersville, but this section right here opposite of Rosecrans' army was only covered by a very small force of cavalry. So we go forward to late August. Rosecrans has got his supplies now. He has his reserve corps opposite and north of Chattanooga, pretending like that's under Granger, pretending like they're going to cross up in that vicinity. Meanwhile, his main main crossing actually occurred back at where the nuclear plant is at Bellefonte. His secondary crossings occurred up here at Bridgeport, which we will go through. His main supply depot area was in Stevenson, which is right up here on the right. So that kind of sets. Late August, Rosecrans gives the signal. You have McCook's Corps crosses at Bellefonte. Thomas crosses up here near Bridgeport and goes due east. You have Crittenden's Corps crosses at Bridgeport and Shell Mound, but then heads directly towards Chattanooga, basically along I-24 now in that area. So you had 3 Army Corps widely separated crossing the river. But it takes several days for Bragg to find out what has happened, because that single regiment had not set up, apparently not set up a courier line to Bragg. So it took about 3 days for Bragg to realize that Rosecrans was crossing the Tennessee River. Meanwhile, Granger is still on the north side, pretending like he's doing something, and Bragg has been looking at that more than anything else. However, Rosecrans, it was so easy for him to knock Bragg back out of Tullahoma that he decided that he didn't need to worry about Bragg and had widely separated those corps. McCook went straight east. Thomas went east and a little bit south first, and then east from Bridgeport. And then Crittenden went north to Chattanooga. So you had over 40 miles difference between one side of Rosecrans' army and the other, and they were all crossing first Sand Mountain, and then they had to cross Lookout Mountain. Both very significant barriers back in the day, even though they aren't tall mountains, but the roads up were narrow and winding, and you couldn't spread out. You had to basically stay on the roads. They what? Some of the places did, like where Cloudland Canyon is now to go over Lookout. They definitely had switchbacks there. Now, when you get between Sand Mountain and Lookout Mountain, you're in Wills Valley. Wills Valley was a good corridor between the mountains where you had some ability to reinforce each other, but it would still take 2 days for the Rosecrans to get his troops together should he need it. Instead, he moves across Lookout and down into the flatland beyond Lookout. Here was Bragg's first opportunity. What he tried to do, he had Forrest tell him that Crittenden's Corps was isolated in the Chattanooga area because Bragg pulled out of Chattanooga and concentrated down in Lafayette. Crittenden's Corps was isolated up there. Thomas had to come across where Cloudland Canyon is, for those of you that have been there, and he was very constrained by the terrain, so he only put one division, Neglig's division, came out into a cove there on the east side of Lookout. Bragg fixed on that and decided, I'm going to defeat that. And he had told Wheeler to get it, to put his cavalry in front of McCook's corps to the south. Well, for whatever reasons, and this was very controversial, he sent two divisions to destroy Neglig's division, and the attack did not occur. You had Hyman and Cleburne. Cleburne was supposed to support Hyman. Hyman was slow getting there. Cleburne was hesitant to go ahead. Pope was over both of them at that time. Pope was very, I would call it insubordinate. He took his orders as advisements, do something if you kind of decide you might want to, you know? And so he was not pushing his subordinates. And Bragg finally got upset and went there personally, but it was too late in the day. Neglig got pulled back to the edge of the mountain and got reinforced by another division. So that didn't work out. Bragg then decided to go after Crittenden, and he ordered Polk to go after Crittenden around Lee and Gordon's Mill, just north of there, the real Chickamauga Battlefield area. But Polk said, well, I'm outnumbered. I cannot attack here. So that did not occur. And the chances of the Confederate Army to defeat the Union Army in detail disappeared, because by this time Rosecrans realized what was going on, and he sent orders to Thomas to move to the north and McCook to get back into Wills Valley, come north, and then rejoin the rest of the army. However, Bragg still had a big opportunity, because his army was concentrated now around Lafayette, and Rosecrans was now somewhat to the south. Granger had come across and was moving into where Chattanooga was, but Bragg still had an opportunity to move to the north and cut off Rosecrans, because he had concentrated in McLemore's Cove, about between 15 and 20 miles south of Chattanooga, and Bragg had the opportunity to move and prevent Rosecrans from connecting to Chattanooga and his supplies. He was hoping to cut him off and drive him back against the mountain. So that laid the groundwork actually for the campaign, because, or for the battle itself, because that was driven by Bragg trying to get between Rosecrans and Chattanooga. And both sides are cognizant of this, and that's why the battle basically developed the way it did. Now this should be Stevenson. Stevenson here is Rosecrans' actual depot. Right up there, he had a bunch of warehouses and supplies and guards. We've been to Fort Granger one time, that was over there protecting all that. Stevenson was Rosecrans' depot. Alright, so that's how the campaign was going, and why, in general, we had a battle at Chickamauga. The real reason was that Rosecrans, to concentrate his army, had concentrated south of Chattanooga because McCook was so far to the south. Bragg was in a position to get between him and Chattanooga, and that's what he was going to try to do, while Rosecrans was looking at the situation and said, I've got to get to Chattanooga too. So that's why that area to the south of Chattanooga, named after the Chickamauga Creek that runs through it, was the site of a major battle. And we'll talk about the details of how that evolved as we go along. But that's the overall situation. So as far as the Chickamauga campaign, down there from Bellefonte, i.e. Scottsboro, all the way up this whole area we're going to go through until we reach the battlefield, that was the scene of the campaign. Chickamauga Creek, which is a obstacle, and you will see that, and cut Rosecrans off. But within 8 hours, he sends out an order saying we got to delay. Now what he had ordered was, he had ordered Forrest to seize the bridges across the Chickamauga River. But unfortunately, he had earlier ordered Forrest to give his troops, or most of his troops, to Polk under Polk's direct command. And so, except for one brigade, which was actually right here on US 41 now, protecting a road on the Army's flank, Forrest only had 300 people. So anyway, it was delayed. It's an indefinite delay. Then the next day, a new order came out that did not address Forrest at all. And Bushrod Johnson, who had a brand new infantry division just formed out of several different brigades that had been smashed together, Forrest and Bushrod Johnson were sitting in Ringgold. Now, Ringgold is a little town up here on the left in about 4 or 5 miles. We won't go through the town, it will be to our left. So at any rate, Bragg's people are trying to get organized and are moving north. And there is an order, the earlier order had said seize 2 bridges across the Chickamauga Creek, actually 3, but one of them didn't play a part in the battle. And so Forrest had sent Scott's brigade to the Red House Bridge, which is the one that didn't play any part in the battle. But he had most of his troops had belonged to Polk, but he had Pegram going to Alexander's Bridge. Now, neither Bushrod Johnson nor Forrest received the updated order. And so they were proceeding directly on the morning of the 18th to go to Alexander's Bridge. But the last order had told other troops to go there. Specifically, it was Walker's Reserve Corps was told to go there. And Bragg, through an omission, or his staff through an omission, hadn't sent anything to Bushrod Johnson, but Bushrod Johnson was supposed to go to Reed's Bridge, which we will see. And so Johnson, with Forrest, with his 300 troops he had left, tagging along, were headed to Alexander's Bridge. And a courier finally reached them on the morning of the 18th and said, no, somebody else is doing Alexander's Bridge. You need to go to Reed's Bridge. So Bushrod Johnson, having left early that morning trying to do the right thing, was down the wrong road, had to countermarch and come back to the different road. Okay? And so what we're going to do is I'm gonna show you basically what happened the morning of the 18th. It was actually a 3-day battle, and the 18th is the first day's battle. It was not extensive, but it was important in getting the crossings across the Chickamauga Creek. Now, why? The creek is not that big, but the banks are very steep, and the bridges were the only good way to get your wagons and your artillery across, because if you went to one of the various fords, the thin wheels there would cut into the banks so much that after the first few went across on a ford, the ford would become unusable and it would be bogged down. So that's why the bridges were of very great importance, particularly to get spare ammunition and the artillery across. All right, now we're turning on Battlefield Parkway, and I got to get up here to explain to the driver exactly where we're going. Okay, good deal. So you had Minty's Cavalry Brigade was manning this area forward of Chickamauga Creek. Now right down here at the base of this hill is a smaller creek called Peavine Creek. Minty's outposts were on that road that's parallel to where we are right now, right down that way. They were manning an outpost at the crossing of Peavine Creek right down there, and that's where the first shots were fired. Okay? So Minty had an entire cavalry brigade, and they started delaying. Now Bushrod Johnson had an infantry division plus Forrest 300 cavalry. So you can see there's a ridge right in front of us right up here. That is called Peavine Ridge. It offered very good delay positions. So Minty was able to delay and delay and delay Bushrod Johnson's attack. Okay? The first contact was down here. Here's Peavine Creek right here. The first contact was down there at 11 in the morning on the 18th. Alright? But it took until about 3 hours to drive Minty over this ridge. We're actually going to stop on the ridge because it's the best place to get a view of the entire area that we're going to be looking at in detail. Just Lookout Mountain. As you can see, that's a major barrier. Okay, that is, I guess, the backdrop for the battle. And then between here and there, but still in the distance, you can see another ridge. That's Missionary Ridge. Now, Missionary Ridge kind of dribbles off as it goes to the south, and you just have isolated hills. But that's Missionary Ridge. Between the two is the Chattanooga Creek. On this side of Missionary Ridge is the Chickamauga Battlefield and Chickamauga Creek, which runs from the south north to go into the Tennessee River. We are on Peavine Ridge right now. Now, the terrain down there on the battlefield was basically wooded with a few cleared fields. The terrain now has still been preserved except for the monuments and the cannon that you're going to find around for the most part. So most of it is wooded, and in fact artillery was not very useful in this area because there weren't that many clear fields of fire. But on the other hand, it was more useful than you would think because the cattle ranged free from the farms that were in the area. so that if you were at ground level, you could actually see a significant distance, several hundred meters or yards, depending on how you prefer to measure it, because the cattle had eaten the undergrowth and the lower leaves. So the visibility was not as bad in the woods as it is now. Okay? So that's the kind of terrain that we're going to go into, and we're actually going to go into it now. But unfortunately, you can't see it quite as well as I would like. And you can keep looking. Like I said, we're going to turn around and stop also to let you the other side of the bus see better. But that, from here that way, that is the arena that we will be going through all day today. Okay?
Sherry said she really said 2%.
Okay.
Yeah, she said corporate.
Okay, so there should be one person here, though.
Technically, it is West Chickamauga Creek. Now, and if we really want to confuse you, we can talk about South Chickamauga Creek and North Chickamauga Creek, each of which have a each of them have, each North and South Chickamauga Creek have a east, middle, and west. All right.
It gets confusing, yeah. Okay, so as I said, Bushrod Johnson was pushing Minty's brigade back through here. Minty was successfully delaying over the ridge from Peavine Creek, over the ridge, and down to here. So where we are on the map now, we are right here. Here's the creek flowing north to the Tennessee, and here's the ridge up here. So we have Minty is delaying, as I say. He has 2 guns out of Eli Lilly's battery with him, and they are holding into this area. Now, this is the reason, as you can see behind me, this is the reason the bridges were so important. Because if that bridge gets taken out, the infantry can probably cross, the cavalry can probably cross, but the artillery and the wagons for the ammunition, they're not going to cross. Okay? So this was a vital bridge. I already told you, Scott's brigade was way up this way, protecting and holding the bridge between Chattanooga and Ringgold. That was protecting the right flank of the Confederate Army. But here, Minty and Wilder down at Alexander's Bridge, down that way, were protecting Rosecrans' planned movement towards Chattanooga, which is why they were up here. Wilder was mounted infantry with repeating rifles. Minty was the Sabre Brigade, the pride of the cavalry, right, of the Union cavalry right there. So, here, the attack came to here. Forrest actually took some of his horsemen and crossed back that way on a ford to kind of come around. But after delaying until about 4 in the afternoon, Minty decided he had accomplished his mission, and he pulled off, and Johnson and his people were able to cross and move down. I'll talk about that a little more in a moment. At the same time, Pegram and his cavalry were supposed to seize Alexander's Bridge down here. Wilder's men stopped Pegram cold. So Pegram kind of drew off to the side and eventually just hung around here, and an infantry division under Liddell was committed in this area right here. However, that infantry division was also stymied by the repeating rifles, the steep bank, and the underbrush around the creek itself. Wilder had the other two guns of Lily's right here, two other guns of Lily's right there, supporting him, and was able to destroy Alexander's bridge by just tearing it up and throwing it into the water.
So question, so there was no bridge here?
No, that Reed's Bridge actually was right, I think it was over here.
Yeah,
right here.
I'll talk about its specific location in a minute. This is not it. No. Once John finishes, I'll point that out.
So anyway, Wilder also, at 4 in the afternoon, decides to withdraw to the west. So the Union cavalry is now withdrawn to the west, and the Confederacy could use the bridge and the crossing area, and in fact that night they would reconstruct parts of the bridge. Now, one of the key things that happened was Bushrod Johnson was senior to Forrest, but a guy showed up and took over from him, and that was Hood. Hood had been wounded at Gettysburg, and his division was being commanded by Law. He was kind of extranumerary, but he was a senior guy. He showed up, he had already talked to Bragg, and took charge, and this was one of the things that David Powell said was a key element here. Bushrod Johnson was planning on going this way towards the Lafayette Road. Hood said no, we should go south down here to join up with the rest of the army around a ford down there, okay? So Hood overruled Johnson. Now that would have played a big role, because if Bushrod Johnson had gone to Lafayette Road, he would have blocked the Union Army that night from going north. It's one of those things that happens. All right.
To just touch on a piece about about Hood's decision. The communication he had from Bragg, he learned that he's taking over Bushrod Johnson's column, which has been directed that you are to cross the creek at or near Reed's Bridge, and upon crossing the creek, sweep up the Chickamauga towards Lee and Gordon's Mill, which is where Bragg correctly placed the Union left flank at the time. And so Hood has that. Lee and Gordon's Mill. Where's Lee and Gordon's Mill? Lee and Gordon's Mill is 5 miles in that direction. So he crosses the creek and turns south, despite the fact that Bushrod Johnson says, I think we should go towards Lee and Gordon's Mill by going out towards the Lafayette Road. Bushrod Johnson understood more critically the importance of cutting the Lafayette Road. But 2 stars always trump 1 star. Even if you are a 2-star who's just got off a train from a multi-day train ride coming from Virginia when you didn't have to because you're still recovering from your left arm wound outside that small South Central Pennsylvania college town. But 2 stars always no better than 1 star. Yes, sir.
All right, so I thought that Bragg's order indicated the guys coming across Alexander's Bridge were not to move until they had linked up with Johnson coming across Reed's Bridge. And in my simple mind, that's why Hood went down, because they needed to trigger their advance also.
Well, but the way Johnson wants to go is out the Brotherton Road,
right.
Which would have, by communication by contact, would have allowed them to make contact with
so just
with
a courier,
Walker.
sending couriers
Yes.
would have done the same thing.
Yeah, right.
Right.
But Hood probably taking the advice of a local soldier who has been detailed to be a local guide, which Bragg did, including the 2 Reed boys from who lived here at Reed's Bridge with their parents. They are both detailed to be local guides. Tom Brotherton winds up being a local guide for James Longstreet. Hood probably said, when he gets to the intersection up here with Jays Mill Road, probably said, well, how do you get to Lee and Gordon's Mill? And the boy said, well, my daddy sent me to the mill any number of times with corn to be ground. You turn left here. It's again not understanding the commander's intent, the mission, the goal, the terrain, reading it, making decisions from a military perspective as opposed to just simply, a life perspective. Now that you have seen the creek and you see how much of a potential military obstacle it is, the geology of this region is layer upon layer of limestone, and the creek is literally carved down into the underlying limestone. And it has steep, sharp banks along most of its length. The drought that we are suffering under right now allows you to see more of the rocks. And if you go along the creek, you can see these layers of limestone in the bank or in the banks of the creek, which is why you've got to have the bridges or fords to be able to get across the creek.
But they did have a bridge here.
There's a bridge here. And Bragg did not fully appreciate the obstacle nature of the creek, particularly in comparison to Rosecrans' appreciation of the obstacle nature of the creek.
Yeah, I bet that channel's 8 or 10 feet deep right out there in the middle.
But, yeah, potentially even deeper. Because of this limestone geology, there can be great big huge deep holes, and an individual, we could do this today, you could find a way to get down the bank and into the water, and you could be walking along perfectly fine, and all of a sudden you take another step, and you might be 10 or 15 feet under the water.
And your cannon's gone.
Well, you're not going to get wheeled vehicles down these banks unless you cut them down, which is not going to be easy because of the layers of limestone. So the bridges and fords are absolutely critical.
Question. Could it be that the creek flowed faster?
No, there's a year-long drought in 1862, 1863. The water level is very low. The depth of the water at the fords is reported by the soldiers to be knee to waist deep. However, that depends on the height of the soldier. The taller the soldier, the shallower the water. The shorter the soldier, the deeper the water. Remember that when you're reading soldiers' letters and diaries and you see descriptions of fording a body of water. When some soldier complains that the water was up to his neck, ask yourself, well, maybe that soldier is much shorter. So, but depth of water does matter at a ford, and amazingly, in 160 years, the depth of water on fords for all military purposes has really not changed from the Civil War period to this very moment today. At the time of the Civil War, water could be no more than 30 inches deep on the ford, because at 32 inches you get to the load-bearing surfaces of the limbers and the wagons and the like. Today, for all military purposes today, the depth of water on the ford is described as 2/3 of a meter, which is awfully close to 30 inches. And that's based off of where the air intake is on a standard off-the-shelf Humvee without a fording kit on it. So how much has changed in 160 years? Now, you ask where the bridge was. The wartime bridge, and sir, if I were to command you to half right face forward march, you would march across the wartime bridge. The wartime bridge went across right here on this axis. When the National Military Park is created, one part of the National Military Park was the approach road system. The major roads over which the troops moved to reach the battlefield. The National Military Park once owned 100 miles of road leading to the battlefield, including this road all the way into Ringgold, Georgia. The approach roads were returned to the local governments in the 1930s, 1920s and 1930s. But when the National Military Park owned this road and was coming into existence in the 1890s, the wooden bridge that was here at the time was deemed in need of replacement. And so the Park Commission built a new bridge over the creek. The bridge that was here in 1890 is this structure. And I'll pass this around momentarily. The wartime bridge was probably, and there are actually a couple of images of it, the wartime bridge was probably very similar, although maybe from some slightly lighter timbers. There's a third one. This 1890s one. And so the new bridge was built immediately adjacent to the old bridge. See the cut limestone blocks abutments being constructed in this image, right down, right upstream of the wooden bridge. And here's the abutments finished.
It doesn't look safe now.
Well, that is this. They have not put the new bridge. That's the wooden bridge they're replacing. The abutments for the new bridge are finished.
I got it.
And here is the new bridge, a steel through truss bridge. And it was on these cut limestone block abutments that you see the remains of right here. Of course, rose up higher, as you can see the abutments. And that bridge was used from 1899 till it was replaced in 1970 by that bridge.
Got it.
So the wartime, so Reed's Bridge has moved upstream since the Civil War. The wartime bridge was on this axis, and the sun is not really great right now, but if you shift over a little to your left, there are actually still a couple of timbers from the wooden bridge on the floor of the creek. I didn't bring my hip waders, so I'm not going out there to point them out. But now you're going to get an indication of why I try to be a historian and not anything else. I'm going to chuck this rock into the creek in just a second and watch where it goes into the water, because I'm then going to tell you to look this side of where the rock went in, or the other side of where the rock went in, or to the left or the right, and in the bottom of the creek you will be able to see a wooden timber from the one of the trestles of that last wooden bridge. Okay, just this side of where the rock went into the creek, on the bottom of the creek. And the way the sun and the shade is right now, it's not standing out real well, but you can see one of the wooden timbers of the base of one of the trestles still on the bottom of the creek. There was another piece of it that someone pulled up a few years ago, and it's now washed on downstream. And when I did climb down into the creek and examine it after they had pulled it up, and it was assembled from wire nails, which means it is post-Civil War construction. So that's why I think the wartime bridge may well have been lighter timber than what appears in that in the 1890s. All right, but to keep our schedule, we should probably
The bridge destroyed after the...
No. The planks had been loosened on the bridge by the Confederates as they retreated south on September the 7th, 8th, and 9th. the Federals had put some other material down as planks on the bridge. Minty is trying to throw those off as he pulls away from the area. But the bridge was not destroyed. So what part of it?
After the stop at Reed's Bridge, our roundtable group next traveled to the Visitor Center and Museum and watched the official park video, The Campaign for Chattanooga, Death Knell of the Confederacy. That half-hour film is well worth your time if you are visiting the park. After that, it was already time for lunch, so we boarded the bus and headed north off of park grounds and into Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia.
That's a little bit better. I can hear it myself now. So we're going to go up and meet where the commissary officers have been cooking rations for you. So if you're the Union Army, it's boiled beef and hardtack. If you're the Confederate Army, it's cornbread and boiled beef. So. But I'll take advantage of this to point out a couple of things as we go along. As many of you all know, and as you can see by the map and the brochure for the National Military Park that you got, we're here on the Chickamauga Battlefield. There are 5,300 acres of the battlefield that are protected. You are here on the northern edge of those 5,300 acres now. The battlefield stretches south for about 3 miles along the historic Lafayette Road here. The veterans, when they conceived the idea of the National Military Park, originally wanted a 10,000-acre Chickamauga Battlefield. But when Congress created the National Military Park, they only authorized a 7,600-acre battlefield. But then the Congress, even in the 1890s, as they are so wont to do this day, they authorized or directed one thing and they funded something considerably less. And so that's how we come up with not 7,600 acres, but just the 5,300 that we have today. But the American Battlefield Trust and its predecessors have protected now out there at Reed's Bridge, and that was another story I could have gotten into there, but they're now protected by the American Battlefield Trust, and we'll go straight. And the now one parcel has been transferred to the National Park Partners Chickamauga, Chattanooga, Moxie, and the Friends Group. Will go straight here and up to the four-wheel track Georgia Highway 2 and turn right.
To the left.
Yeah, if you look over to your left, you will see the backs of some of the permanent officer cadre quarters of the old military post of Fort Oglethorpe, and they front the drill field, the parade ground, on which today a school has been built and some ball fields and an old library and some other structures. The chapel, the Catholic Church here is one of the chapels that was built on the post. The tattoo parlor here was the pharmacy. Here's another post building. This was a regimental cavalry post. And today one of the stables survives, and it is this building that we're going to pass on the left here momentarily. That is, here it is, Classic Blades, this white structure right there. It's the last of the stables in the military post of Fort Oglethorpe. And over the buildings to the left, you can see a couple of the warehouses that once fronted railroad sidings that came into the post. The post was 900 acres in size, was created after the military used the Chickamauga Battlefield as a training ground for the Spanish-American War. And so they said, oh, that's not such a bad idea, and they created a permanent military post and then spread back out over the battlefield for World War I and again in World War II. At the end of World War II, the post was declared excess to the national defense needs of the United States and was closed. The property was sold off, and the town, now city of Fort Overthorpe, Georgia, came into existence. Wayne Gordon's Mill is on West Chickamauga Creek, about 4 miles to the south of us.
All right, let's get started. Start off here. All right, it happened the 18th, and all that action happened back behind us over there. And the infantry, Bushrod Johnson, and that went down that way. All right, Forrest broke off and joined Pegram's brigade, which is going to be taken soon by Davidson, but Pegram's brigade at the time, down at Alexander Bridge, down this way, and spent the night there. Some people say that they repaired the bridge, but all they did was they sent the 2nd Georgia up here to outpost this area right here, and they were just south of here. They weren't up there at the current intersection. They were down this way. Well, in the middle of the night, one of the very famous fighting McCooks came down from Granger's bunch and came down here to that bridge and tried to set it on fire, and they captured some stragglers, really, right up here. Now they couldn't catch the bridge on fire, and they turned around and went back, and this is in the nighttime. At the same time, Rosecrans has decided, hey, I'm kind of in trouble. I'm going to tell Thomas to move in the middle of the night from where he was a number of miles south of here on a night march all the way up here to Kelly's Field, back that way. Okay? So Thomas is moving up this way. Well, as McCook is leaving to go back, he says, hey, he hits Thomas and he says, hey, there's a lone Confederate brigade right down in this area. We policed up their stragglers, and they would be very easy to overrun and capture. And then McCook heads back to Chattanooga because his job is with the rest of Granger up there to hold on to Chattanooga. Meanwhile, it's dawn, and Forrest starts heading over here. He sent a patrol up, but they just missed Thomas. They didn't find him there. They kind of fell in between the cracks. And Thomas decides to send Brannan's division down here. One brigade, as Jim already mentioned, came down the road, another one through the woods this way. Okay? And so what happened was they came right in, and the cavalry, Pegram's brigade of cavalry, was here. And they started the fight on the 19th, right here, right up there, along that area, several hundred yards that way. Now, what was interesting was that Croxton's brigade made better progress through the woods than Van Derver did along the road. And Pegram managed to slow down the guys coming down the road. So then Forrest was with them, and he realized that's more than I can handle. So he sends and gets a brigade, Wilson's brigade, of the infantry that is south of here and brings them up. And that is what this portrays right now. Well, you want to talk it?
Well,
you know more than I do.
Oh, well, either way, so
Yeah.
but I can at a minimum hold it. So
Okay, so this is Brannan's division here and here. And you can see Croxton's ahead. All right, and you've got, now I scratched through Debrell. I don't think he was back, he was there yet, because he had been with Polk down at Lee and Gordon's, and he was released that morning. I don't think he made it back early. I think he was later. What do you think?
he arrives just before Wilson does.
Just
So,
before
yeah,
Wilson.
yeah.
Okay. Now anyway, the cavalry is delaying, and Wilson's brigade comes in and hits Croxton over here and hits the right flank of Croxton. Okay? Now I should stop there for a second. Richard Blanton,
Over here.
Wesley, let's see, Wesley Montgomery Wiseman Company, 4th Kentucky U.S. was a part of Croxton's brigade. So they were involved in this fight right over here. I tried to get some people that were going here. So anyway, that fight was going on. Now if you actually orient it, it's sort of like that. You can see what I'm saying here. We are right here. Okay? That's that road up there. That's that road right down there. And there's the little Jay's Mill branch right there.
Were these same roads in existence at that time?
Yes, on the 5,300 acres of the battlefield, the road network within that is very close to what it was in 1863. Battle Line Road, which we'll drive on later on, was not here at the time, but the majority of the roads on the battlefield or today follow wartime alignments.
A battle line road follows the positions of the units.
It developed along the line of monuments. The veterans envisioned people just being able to go cross country to different places on the battlefield. But as you'll see, there's so many monuments along the crest of the low rise for the Union position on September the 20th that literally visitors to the battlefield beat a road into the surface. And the Park Commission then said, okay, we'll just make it a road. This is actually done now a fair amount in architecture. They build a building, they let the people who are going to use the building say where the sidewalks should be.
Yeah.
And the sidewalks actually go in a year or so after the building is completed. So.
Okay, well Croxton is coming this way. He's hit by Wilson right over there, and it recoils, hits him back. Okay. Meanwhile, the cavalry is still slowing down the attack up there. So what happens then is Forrest by this time has figured out there's more going on, because there's a 3rd Brigade in Brannan's division coming, and there's another whole division, Baird's division, that's also going to come. So he goes down here and picks up another brigade, Ector's brigade. Now those 2 brigades came from Walker's Reserve Corps, and Walker was not really on board with that. But Forrest went down there and took him anyway. And so you got Ector coming this way, and you've got a number, it's basically an engagement here that develops over time, back and forth through the woods here, up, back in there and along in this area right here. Ector, because Wilson has held these people, Ector goes up there to hit the other brigade that's coming in. But the Union reinforcements end up outflanking him on both sides, and he gets pushed back very severely in that area as well. So you've got a battle that is developing. Now you've involved elements of 2 Confederate divisions and basically 2 full Union divisions in this area. And the battle gets, you know, it starts spinning out of control is the best way to say that for both sides. It really is. Because now both sides are committed in an area and they keep committing. Now, those of you that saw my presentation earlier, remember I likened the battle on the first day to a zipper closing. And that's exactly what happened here. Starting here and going southwest, successive engagements, and we'll talk about each of them over time, but it's almost like a zipper closing straight down that way as the sides come together. Both sides are outflanking successively the last attack by the other side. They're coming in and hitting them on the flank, and then the next bunch from the other side comes in and hits them on the flank, and it's going back and forth.
In general, each unit's southern flank is threatened by the next enemy unit. So for Union troops, their right flank becomes threatened. For Confederate troops, their left flank becomes threatened. And it flows south. And this happens largely because almost all of the troops on both sides to become committed are down here to the south. The battle is taking place in a wooded, forested environment, even though the vegetation was thin enough that you could see 150 or 200 yards down through the woods. Once the soldiers began to fire, the overhead forest cover trapped the smoke from the discharge of the hundreds, thousands of weapons fired dozens of times in a relatively small area and that 200 or 150 yard visibility is all of a sudden reduced to as little as 10 or 30 or 20 yards. And so what do leaders at all grades have potentially to guide on to tell them where the battle is? The sound. And you literally have units marching to the sound of the guns, and you have officers giving commands to march to the sound of the guns. Braxton Bragg did not literally use those words with Alexander Peter Stewart when he sent Stewart in, but he told Stewart, "You must be governed by circumstances." What does that tell you that Braxton Bragg, at midday on the 19th, knew about what was happening on the battlefield?
Yeah. By this time, virtually nobody understood what was going on.
Yeah.
Now,
Now, wouldn't they hold Bragg responsible for all that? That would cause some of the problems? Bragg.
Not really today. They hold him for some other things. What actually happened was this battle happened up here, a couple of divisions here, elements of one division and a little cavalry on the Confederate side. Walker, by this time, is mad because he's lost 2 of his brigades. He advocates, because he's still got half of one division and all of another, he advocates, let's just punch straight west. And by the time he's with Bragg and Hood. But the consensus was, no, let's not do that. Okay? So Walker gets overruled. And you can argue either way whether that was critical or not. They had, if I remember right, they had both Wilder and Minty were down there protecting along the road.
Well, Wilder's down at the Vineyard Field area.
Yeah.
Minty will eventually move in behind Wilder down there. So
Yeah, but I think at the time, this is 10 o'clock in the morning.
No,
were they down there by that time?
Wilder has
Okay.
pulled back across the Lafayette Road by that time, and Minty has gone kind of down to refit, and then he'll later be briefly behind Wilder.
Okay.
Would you kindly point out Missionary Ridge?
It is not on this map,
Okay.
except that what becomes known as Snodgrass Hill is
Okay.
the eastern projection of a spur of Missionary Ridge.
Okay.
And so these tight contour lines on the northwest corner of the Battlefield Park map right here are kind of the eastern edge of Missionary Ridge. Missionary Ridge here near the northern end of it is almost 2 miles wide east and west.
How about the weather? Was it like it is today?
No, not this warm. The day was warm. Some soldiers describe it as hot, but remember, they're moving around, running around, and they're being shot at. And so their perception of the temperature being higher can be understood, but it had been cold enough to frost on the night of the 18th and the early morning hours of the 19th. And the temperature on the night of the 19th and the early morning hours of the 20th was even colder, so much so that it was said that ice formed on the surface of water in buckets, and the frost was so heavy in open grassy fields that in walking across the field in the morning, the grass crunched under your feet. And one soldier said there was a hoar frost, which is when the temperature gets so cold that water vapor in the air, upon contacting something that is below freezing, instantly freezes, crystallizes. So that probably puts the temperature on the night of the 19th, early morning hours of the 20th, well down into the 20s.
Okay, well, Walker
still wearing their woolies, right?
Yeah.
Well, but just their summer.
Just their summer
uniform.
stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, one layer. All right, Walker gets overruled. All right, so he takes the rest of Liddell's people, and brings them up into this battle, and they come in on the left flank, right there between here and the next field, which is Winfrey Field, and they come in and they hit hard there. And it basically sends Brennan back off the field. By that time they were about out of ammo anyway. And so it cleaned up this area of the battlefield for a while with that attack. But of course, as we said, that then brought in more of the troops from the other side.
Palmer, then Johnson for the Federals, and Cheatham for the Confederates. So.
See Liddell coming in here, and you got Walker, and then Forrest over here.
Was the direction of flow of overall was still this way?
Well, it's both. The troops are coming up from the south. Right. Confederates then turn westward. Union troops turn eastward, and the battle then winds up flowing south. Because each next arriving unit is marching to the sound of the guns in the limited visibility forested environment, and since they're coming up from the south, where does it sound like the guns are the loudest at that moment? Right in front of them, and so they march towards where that sound is. They then, for Confederates, threaten the right flank of a Federal unit, and they then go into action. And the battle then has progressed a little bit further south. So.
Okay, we are running, we're about 10 minutes behind, so if we can roll back up, we've got to head out to the next place. Winfrey Field, as I said. Our part of Liddell came across here. They were able to drive through the field, and you see that one thing we always point out here, you cannot see people beyond where the bus is now. If you're standing there and they're standing there, no bus support, because the field is like this. So they're what's called defilade down there until they get up that rise. They get a little closer. Okay, Liddell is successful for a while. Like I say, he drives Brennan. Then what happens? Johnson's division. Johnson's division comes in from here and hits Liddell. Pushes them back. Okay? So now Liddell is down that way, out of the field. It is actually pushed all the way back. Then what happens? Well, Cheatham's division by 12:30, and that's the strongest division in the Confederate Army, comes in to the left of Liddell and pushes, just like that. Again, the zipper is closing all the way down. Now, let's see, I had a couple of... Basically, though, Cheatham was this way. This area stabilized more or less around noon, and nothing happened until the night. Okay? Because the troops on each side were basically fought out, needed ammunition resupply and everything like that. So this area was quieter now, and the main battle was moving south, or southwest really. But after nightfall, Cleburne is committed through Winfrey Field, and he manages to attack and push back again. But when you hit the woods at night, you lose cohesion, you lose organization, so his attack is only successful to a very limited degree right along here. And then combat ceases at night here. But there's all afternoon, there's going to be more stuff that we talk about down that way. Okay, and let's see. You got that guide on? Where'd John go?
He's still over at the flag.
Oh, he's still over there.
All right.
He has the guide on of the battery for those cannon over there. That's what he has. Actually, he's got a large flag. All right, Richard again. This time, John Wesley Gentry. Okay, Company G, 38th Indiana, was probably wounded up in that corner, right up there, right inside the wood line, when they were counterattacking Wilson, but then were pushed back by Liddell. He probably was wounded during that action, right up there. And then the Croxton's brigade, by this time, by the afternoon, had resupplied their ammo, and they were recommitted. And so your 4th Kentucky attacked from the north down this way, and then were driven back to the north of Brockfield, which is the next field down, and he was probably killed up there north of Brockfield. Now, well, you know more about it, so.
Yeah, well, this field is right close to its actual wartime alignment. But one of the things that led the veterans to create this battlefield park was, as they returned and visited the battlefield in 1863, 1864, 1865, the late 1860s, 1870s, 1880s, as people returned, there were changes in the landscape, and people were having a hard time finding where it was they had fought on September 18, 19, or 20. And this is one of the impetus for creating the National Military Park. Let's return the battlefield to its wartime appearance. This field had gotten much larger in the post-war period. And so they actually began to plant the field up, and they marked the historic field corners with small stones. And all 4 of this field's cornerstones still stood until a dozen years ago, when the maintenance guys got one of them, one of the many they've gotten over the years. This one is now missing, but in the corner, the other 3 corners of the field, the veteran placed cornerstones for Winfrey Field are still there, and we've tried to trim the vegetation up to the wartime alignment of the field. There's a 5-foot high split rail zigzag worm fence around the field. It becomes a fighting position. for troops on both sides as the fight, as John explained, progresses across and into and out of this field multiple times during the course of the day. The 1st Ohio, whose monument is right there, will spend much of their time here in position along the fence here on this western side of the field. And they will knock the fence down, pile the rails more tightly, and create a low mound of rails to be some crude field fortification. But if you actually get down just a little bit further, as John noted, it reduces your visibility to the other side of the field. And at one point in this action, the Lieutenant Colonel in command of the 1st Ohio, E. Bassett Langdon, after driving the Confederates out of the field itself, but still desiring to fire at them as they retreat into the woods and fire on any more who may try to attack into the field, actually moved his regiment out into the field to the point where he could see down the slope towards that edge to be able to fire at those retreating Confederates and potentially any Confederates who then tried to advance again. So reading these little subtleties in the terrain are often very important. And Langdon's position here is a good example of that. An iron in particular, it allows us to give you a concrete example of an officer doing that. So many times, that's not the kind of thing they record in their reports, because that would just be the normal thing an officer would do. But what would we love to know now 160 years later? What were some of those little normal things that you did to actually control the area where you are?
There's a reasonable expectation.
Yeah, you know, I'm sure when you all go home every evening and you make your diary entry, probably now you know, on your smartphone, you know, you say, so I went to the grocery store today. And so you describe how you went out of the door of the house and locked it, and you walked to the car. You pushed the button on your fob and unlocked the door of your car. Got in, stuck the key in the ignition, or today dropped the keys in your lap and pushed the start button. Well, 100 years from now, what may be something somebody wants to know? How the heck did you start one of these things?
Yeah, really.
You know, a lot of times we don't have all of the little details to really understand what happened here. But when we do, it gives you some real insight how there are people actually doing things here. Not just big generals, but people much lower down the chains.
How much impact did acoustic shadows produce here?
Well, there are no real acoustic shadow impact here, but there are lots of people noted how this battle seemed to sound louder than other battles. Because where's most of the fighting occurring? In the woods. And literally, the forest traps the sound in. The sound from an individual discharge bounces off of multiple trees and branches, and you hear that, what you do, magnify that thousands of times, and the perception was that this was a louder battle. And because visibility is so limited, you can't really tell whether the loudness of the sound that you hear in front of you is where the guns are really the loudest at that moment, or is it just because that's the way you're approaching it. So I'm sure that the extent to which I'm full of hot air is more evident to you all than if there were somebody standing back there, because I'm projecting in this direction, so they're literally moving to the sound of the guns, which is hard to judge in the limited visibility environments.
A lot of echo effects too.
I'm sorry?
Would there be a lot of echo effects?
No, not too
really
many. No.
False suppressed?
Yeah, it all just kind of merges together in the woods.
We probably need to hit the bus. We're running, like I say, a little bit.
The first Ohio, which we saw, these mark the Union line. And if you look now to your left, you'll see the back of the monument to the 32nd Indiana. These are the monuments of the regiment of the brigade of the Arch Communist Dust Billing. This is Richard Johnson's division sector. We're now going to cross Alexander Bridge Road. We'll go straight to your railroad. Of course, after we stop, when it's clear. And we enter the sector of Cheatham's division, as John described. Cheatham is somewhat attacking northwestward up this corridor of this Alexander Bridge Road. You can kind of picture that in your mind. We're now in the sector where Jackson's and Maney's brigades, first Jackson and Maney, will be engaged. Here are their tablets right here. Maney's brigade includes that well-known Confederate Army of Tennessee character by the name of Sam Watkins in the 1st Tennessee Strike. Sam Watkins, he wrote Company H, that memoir of a Confederate soldier. He's from Murray County, Tennessee, from the Zion community, just south of Columbia. And there's a page, this is the wartime, or this is the Brock Field. It was much larger. 3 or even 4 times larger than it is today, and extended this far, extended this distance that much further to the south. It was wider as well. Pull in here and this out.
Okay, we got about everybody, I guess. All right, this is Brock Field to your front. All right, actually, I guess I should turn around and be on that side.
Yeah, or we'll turn it upside down. So.
Yeah, okay. All right, Winfrey Field's here. We're down here now, okay? Now I talked to you about, okay. So we talked about Cheatham's attack. Guiding on Alexander Bridge Road, right here. And this is the road we're on right there. We're right here. So Cheatham's attack went sweeping up this way and was very successful for a little bit. Unfortunately for him, you had 2 divisions come in and hit him, and I got to look and see. I don't remember.
Palmer and then Johnson's.
Yeah. And some of Van Cleve's guys got over
eventually, too. Yes.
All right.
Here, yeah.
So you had 2 divisions come and drive him back. And so his attack started a little after noon, but by 2 o'clock, he was pushed back this way again. So again, the zipper closed and it moves back and forth a little bit, but sort of stabilizes in that area. Now, then what happens is at 2:15, Stewart's division comes in to the left here and pushes the Union back in this direction. Again, just closing together. Now, that was at 2:15. Now Jonathan Quickmore, there you are. The 38th Alabama is in the southwest corner down that way, okay? They helped drive back Van Cleve's division and actually moved all the way west of Lafayette Road, which is several hundred yards that way, before pulling back at night And then eventually they ended up moving north up that way for overnight. All right, Ben Lowe. Where's Ben? He didn't make it out here. All right, I'll tell him he's in there. But his 28th Tennessee Wright's Brigade, Cheatham's division, over here was part of the initial attack. Now, one of the things that happened, your guy that got killed, was back in the woods back that way. That's where the battery was overrun. His
the 4th Kentucky guy?
No, this is a different guy.
You're talking about the 75th?
75th Indiana?
Yeah,
okay, yeah, that's over in that direction. They're going to come in here between Gross and Van Cleve. They're going to be over here.
Yeah, because I think there was a monument.
Yeah, and anyway, that's where he was killed. His great-great-grandfather,
Great-great-granduncle, granduncle,
was the first person killed according to a report he found in the Indiana unit. Okay, up to you.
All right. The fight here around the Brock Field is very useful as insight into command and control within the two armies. Yes, the Confederates are going to win the Battle of Chickamauga, but they're not going to win it the way Bragg wanted to win the battle, because the senior Confederate leadership can't work well as a team. And by and large, despite the Union defeat, the Union leadership works very well together. Now, it's not perfect, but in comparison to Bragg's senior command team, it is much better. And one of the things that is happening is that Rosecrans moves his headquarters up from Crawfish Springs to the home of the Winneglens, where the telegraph line still can be accessed. Rosecrans, information is sent to Rosecrans by Thomas, by Brannan, by Baird, by Palmer, by Johnson, by lots of different people. And Rosecrans is able to keep track of how the battle goes. And as a result, he has seen by midday that each one of his units engaged so far has been threatened on its southern flank. And so he, when John Palmer's division comes onto the field, Rosecrans tells John Palmer personally. Palmer went to Rosecrans' headquarters, and Rosecrans said, General Palmer, or probably more accurately, John, instead of going into action in our standard formation at per Casey's tactics of 2 brigades up and 1 brigade back, and within each brigade they're in 2 lines, instead of going in 2 up and 1 back, instead go in echelon. And what Rosecrans meant was,
Hey, that's a Navy term. You should know what that is.
Hazen's brigade was to the left front, and then Cruft's brigade is to Hazen's right rear, and then Gross's brigade is to Cruft's right rear. And Rosecrans said this will allow you to deal with threats to your left flank. And indeed it does. And as a result, as Hazen comes marching into this area and makes contact with Confederates, that's the monument you see there, that's the marker on the map there, he makes contact with Confederates, quickly realizes that Cheatham's line extends well beyond his right flank, and it is then communicated to Cruft, and Cruft comes up, but because the Confederate line extended further beyond, Cruft is actually not going to be able to deploy on the same line, but he begins to bend back a little bit, and then Gross tries to come up, but the same thing, and Gross winds up facing to the south. And that's why you see Palmer formed like this. they're able to react to the changing circumstances on the battlefield because they have better teamwork, better communication up and down the chain. It's not perfect, but it is far better than in Bragg's command. And Palmer's deployment is a good example of that. So.
Now, one thing to keep in mind, Bragg's overall intent with this was to cut Rosecrans away from Chattanooga. But instead, that's not what's happening at all. You have a successive engagement down this way, and Rosecrans is ending up still in good position to be able to retreat to Chattanooga if he needs to be.
The real objective.
I'm sorry?
That was the real objective.
What was?
Chattanooga.
Well,
the Army was.
Yes.
He wanted to destroy Rosecrans' army, but by cutting him off from his base, forcing him back in the mountains, and defeating him in detail. That's what he really wanted.
Yeah. So there are a lot of different levels at which that you've got to review and consider that. So, all right. Other questions or observations here? From 1865, because what has been one of the hallmarks, sadly, of our nation now for almost 250 years, even before the current war that we are in is over, the populace of our nation turns away from things military. But by the 1890s, there was some advancements in naval guns, and so they didn't need the round shells any longer, and so they were sent to the National Military Park to be used as monuments.
Okay, we're right here. Okay, Vineyard Field is back over there. That's the primary Vineyard Field. All right.
The house was actually right down there. Yeah, that little flat area right there. There's to your right.
Okay. So what has happened is things have stabilized up here, but now again the battle is moving south. You've got basically this is Davis's people right here, but you also have some Van Cleve and Reynolds. All kinds of, well, Wilder is actually more or less separate here. Advancing into the field over there. Well, what they do not realize is you've got Law, Johnson, and one of Preston's brigades actually gets involved here and attacks that way through the field and through the woods over here. Now this monument actually is Haig's monument right there. He was mortally wounded as a brigade commander there. He was the guy that was actually had a monument in Minneapolis, and unfortunately for him, he was also a rabid abolitionist.
In Madison.
Was it Madison?
Yeah, Madison, Wisconsin.
But as a part of the George Floyd thing, his statue got taken down too.
So it's the one that you saw being dragged through the streets of the city and then dumped off a bridge into a river? Yeah. That's the Haig Monument.
Yeah.
And it says right on the front of it, abolitionist.
Right.
Yeah. Everybody's very good.
So anyway, this fight was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon right here. And these brigades, obviously outnumbered, were being driven back. Now, I wanted to talk about Wilder separately, so let's see what else I have to say. Well, I'll let you talk about the fight here, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about Wilder down there.
As the fight, as John has described, it's this snipper effect coming together as it flowed south through the area of the Brotherton Farm where we turned onto the Lafayette Road. Rosecrans in the afternoon will commit more troops. He is getting some assistance in command and control from both McCook and Crittenden. But it is really Rosecrans who is responsible for sending Van Cleve and Davis towards the area. Now, McCook and Crittenden are going to provide some guidance about exactly how to go in, but Rosecrans is very involved in the fight. And Jefferson Davis's division, this is the Union division that is commanded by that unarrested, unindicted, untried, unconvicted, unpunished murderer of his superior officer, William Bull Nelson, whom he had gunned down in the lobby of the crowded Galt House in Louisville in the fall of 1862, fled across the Ohio River to Indiana, where his friend Governor Morton protected him from any fallout from this. This did not affect his professional career in the U.S. Army after the war. He is the man who receives from Russia Alaska for us in 1867. But Davis
I don't think they ever promoted him beyond Brigadier General, though, did he?
Well, yes, he does become, because he becomes the 14th Corps Commander in 1864.
Right, but I think he was appointed that still as a Brigadier General, wasn't he?
That may be. I'd have to look at that again, but he stayed in the Army after the war and had a long career in the U.S. Army. But Davis's small division marches onto the field, and he has been told to go support Van Cleve and Reynolds, who are fighting in the woods on the other side of the road. But as John has shown you on that map, what's there an awful lot of in the woods on the other side of the road? Yeah. And Davis, when he goes in, is not connected to Reynolds and Van Cleve to the north, and he goes into the woods. And his right is out here into this field, and both flanks of it are threatened, and he is driven back. It's another illustration of the effects of this landscape on the course of the action.
Note that this division, Confederate division, is under the command of Law. That's Hood's old division, and was the one division of the Army of Northern Virginia that brought its weight fully to bear in this battle. McLaw's division, which was commanded by Kershaw at the battle, only gets involved on the last day, and even then, not totally.
The Thomas J. Wood's division will come up from the south. Davis and Wood will reorganize and go back into the woods on the other side of the road. Yet again, what happens? They are driven out of the woods when this time Law's division is attacking. Davis first is mostly dealing with Johnson's division as it moves, and as John said, cross the Lafayette Road between here and the Brotherton Farm, where we turned onto the Lafayette Road. And then Law's division is going to attack and come into this area, driving Davis and Wood back. But there is one more Union unit here that we haven't really brought into the story.
Right, and it's better to go down here and see that. Now we're going to walk a little ways down this way.
We toss names around back and forth.
So, and the law had just been modified. The height had been reduced from 6 feet to 5 feet. Yes.
Did the split rail fences? Did they have pins down?
No. They're stacked. They're just stacked rail fences. Farmers would let the fence rows grow up with vegetation, which would help keep the rails together, help get the wind to go over them, to not blow them down, and also help keep the animals away from the fence so that they wouldn't find a weak spot and push through. Yeah. Now, it took years and years and years and years to convince management here to let me and another now retired fellow on the staff put up the stacked rail fences that you see here on the battlefield, what I still have been unable to do is to keep the daggone maintenance guys from mowing in the fence corners. They don't think the fences look neat, and they particularly think they look bad when the fence rows grow up with vegetation. But that's the way they were. Yeah, and so they periodically have convicts cut the vegetation, or pay a contractor to cut the vegetation, or the like. On the fence rows. So.
Well, I've often wondered about these split rail fences, if they were actually pinned
they're not pinned. No.
I mean, the big kerfuffle at Gettysburg was all about they'd get to the fence and then they'd go into.
Well, that's a different type of fence. That's a post and rail fence with vertical posts sunk into holes in the ground, with the rails inserted into to openings in the fence. And those fences were erected by digging your row of holes, putting a post in the ground, putting the 5 or 6 or 7 rails in the holes in that post, and then putting the next post in the ground before you tamp it into place. And then as you stand that post up, you put the rails in, and once it is vertical, you then tamp that post in place, and then you put the rails in on the other side, and those fences are a real obstacle. But even a stacked rail fence with the vegetation grown up is an obstacle too. And in Claiborne's division, they practiced dealing with fences. They would move up to a fence, instead of climbing across it where they might expose themselves, they would move up to the line of the fence, and then the command was given, and the men would step into the fence corners, put their shoulders against the fence, and then on command, they would all push. And the reason they have to do this on command is all that vegetation that's intertwined in there on command, they would all push, and they literally would spread that fence out in front of them.
I'm often wondering why that was such a big deal.
Yep. Well, at Gettysburg, it's those post and rail fences. Look at Antietam, the pictures of the Confederate dead along the Hagerstown Road. Look how few rails are out of place in that fence.
Yeah, I saw it.
The Antietam pictures are really good too. Look at the number of gaps opened in the post and rail fence lines that you see, so that troops could pass. Here, there are examples in the Dyer Field in particular, where someone, probably John Brannan or John Mendenhall, had fences flattened ahead of time so they would not obstruct movement across the field. And in the Tullahoma phase, when Bragg retreated across the Elk River and briefly thought about offering battle to Rosecrans, Hardee's men prepared the battlefield by flattening the fences. When Rosecrans' men had come across the Elk River and advanced into the area from which Hardee had withdrawn, they remark on the flattened fence lines. They had cleared the area for the fight. I know we've got that.
Well, all right. Come around where you can kind of see this. All right. Again, Lafayette Road. All right, they could not make it. So Benning's guys were on this side here. Benning and his guys were combat veterans, Army of Northern Virginia. They knew what was going on. They said, we've got to attack. You see where that brush line is right there? That brush line is lower ground.
It's an arm of this wet weather drain.
Right. So they moved up that to try to flank Wilder's position, because that was his flank. Eli Lilly moved 2 of his guns, double shot canister, right down that low ground. Benning's people were slaughtered right there.
Henry Campbell said of the 18th Indiana Battery, we carried armloads of canister to the muzzles of the gun and dumped them on the ground. He's the bugler, and he's assisting carrying ammunition forward to then be loaded and fired.
Yeah, and it was, obviously, that was the end of the day for Law's guys here. They could not breach that line.
And the visitor center had a good video about the Spencer rifle. It was amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, 7 shots, and it worked. And obviously everybody else was taking 20 to 30 seconds, if you're not moving, to reload 1 shot, you know? So anyway, that's where I was talking about I disagreed with. Right. You can look at the terrain and you can say, okay, obvious, we are in a beaten zone here. If we move that way, we're in partial defilade and we can probably penetrate. And the artillery decided different.
You'd have trouble getting around the far side to shoot at this drainage.
Yeah. You're talking about the way Dave says.
Right, exactly. Yeah, he's got the battery moving up to there.
He based that off of the way Glenn Tucker shows it, and it's just wrong.
Yeah, the Powell book that has the facing page text, some of you have, shows Lily moving forward all the way to fire down the wet weather here, but that, as you can easily tell, this is all woods here full of Confederates. That would not have worked well for the battery, for the section of artillery.
Yeah. Lieutenant Scott is ordered by Lilly to shift one section of the battery to the left to be able to fire down the arm of that drainage. So.
Where would the actual batteries have been placed?
Well, they were initially, as you can see, on either flank, like this. So because that's an important part about artillery in the Civil War. Their usage was much more similar to what we use machine guns for now in infantry fire. So if you're in a defensive position, you want interlocking across the front of you. So you put the batteries out there so that they're firing from either flank across this. You see what I'm saying? That way, not only you got the rifles that you're facing, but you've got the canisters coming right down the line, and you're getting a more lethal way of engaging, because you're kind of firing along the line, not totally an enfilade, but you're sort of getting a little of that help there. So the section didn't have to move very far to get to the head of that basically call it a gully. And it was good tactical initiative to try to use that, but as soon as that battery got into position, it became very bad for Benning's guys.
The most important thing about this is that Wilder had identified this wet weather drainage and the arm of the ditch as dead space to him, right, with his direct fire weapon systems ahead of time. And so when Confederates wind up in there, in that dead space, he already is aware that it is there, and he can then start taking steps to neutralize that dead space. So,
okay, there was movement, you know, towards the end of the day, before dark. But basically, this area, other than Cleveland's attack way back up at Winfrey Field, this was kind of the end of that zipper effect right down here. And both sides were, to a great extent, fought out for this day. It was time to quit, get a little food, get ammunition resupply, go find your wounded comrades and take care of them. All that sort of thing started happening after this attack, except for, again, Cleveland's attack after dark.
Are we still standing on Brotherton Farm?
No, we're on the Vineyard Farm now.
Okay.
Yeah, Vineyard cabin was right over there.
Oh, okay.
Now there is, the Brotherton cabin was up that way.
Yeah.
See, at the other end of the field, you can actually, well, that's Brock. I'm sorry, that's Brock. Yeah, Brotherton is a good ways up there.
About a mile to the north. So.
Big farms, right? Slave?
Well, no, there are not very many slave owners. Very few of the people who lived here owned the land. Only about a third of the people who lived here were landowners. Now, the largest slaveholder in Cajusca County is John P. Alexander over here at Alexander's Bridge. But the majority of the people are not. The vineyards are only tenants, and they did not live here in 1860. they are elsewhere in Catoosa County in 1860. So sometime between the census of 1860 and 1863, they moved to this farm. It's not clear from the census who is living here in 1860 to then try to get some idea of why the farm is the way it is. So we know names on the census over in that direction and up in this direction, but here we can't follow the census taker's route real specifically to be able to say that, oh, so-and-so lived here at the time.
Okay, so what we're going to do now, going to get back on the bus and go.
Negative views of Rosecrans to Stanton, just as Dana knew Stanton was. No. Now, some of you all may be tempted to want to climb to the top of the mountain by here, but we don't have the time to do both that and what John and I already do have lined up for you. The Snodgrass Hill Fitness and Assault Walk, which I do with some of my military groups, but I can't tell them that ahead of time because then they don't want to do it.
That's right. Okay, so this is where Rosecrans, after things start quieting down, he sends for his corps commanders, and they join him at the side of the cabin, or at the cabin here. Yep. And they all get inside and discuss. He has a council of war. What should we do? What's going on? All that sort of thing. And Rosecrans, unfortunately, is a bit of a hyper person. And so he keeps this council of war running till 1 o'clock in the morning, basically. Almost 1 o'clock anyway. And, you know, they're sitting there having a little supper. He starts singing is what one of the things...
Well, he asked McCook, who was known to have a good voice, to entertain them with a song, and McCook chooses the Hebrew Maiden's Lament. So, Rick, you ready? 1, 2, 3.
But Thomas, remember, he marched all night the night before. So he's falling asleep in the corner. But every once in a while he wakes up and says, reinforce the left, which is where he was, up there, you know. And that was basically his contribution to the Council of War.
The big thing is they decide they are going to stay and fight. They did briefly consider pulling back into the eastern hills of Missionary Ridge to the northwest of here, but they quickly disposed of that possibility, because if they did, they would have to abandon hundreds of seriously wounded Union soldiers who have been collected in the 7 of 9 Union Infantry Division field hospitals that have been located within 1 mile of Crawfish Springs to the southwest of where we are right now. And they did not want to leave comrades behind. And so they say, since Bragg has manifested a desire to attack us, we'll take up as strong a defensive position as we can, and we will await Bragg's assaults the next day. And in addition to George Thomas saying, I would strengthen the left, partly because that's where he is, it also is a reflection that they all recognize that where Bragg's greatest chance of success was to concentrate against the left of the Union line.
Because that's the way to Chattanooga.
That's the way to Chattanooga. And by one account, Rosecrans is said to have said, gentlemen, I will protect the left with the entire army if necessary. They are focused on the left. They expect the attack to come at day dawn. And what happens, actually even before the Council of War had begun, they are going to pull back overnight. So here's that general map for September the 19th. The zipper effect. The two armies having come together along this general line. Overnight, the Union troops are going to pull back to the corridor of the Lafayette Road, which is right here. So now, as I turn this map over, watch the blue blocks come back to the corridor of the Lafayette Road. Now, the line is not this well defined at dawn on the morning of September the 20th, but they are working towards what you are going to see on this line. They pull back to the corridor of the Lafayette Road and take up defensive positions. And this is going to allow them to reform divisions, 2 brigades up and 1 brigade back. It's going to allow them to create some crude field fortifications, and we'll see how this line more specifically is developed, as in a minute we will leave here, go up to the top of the line here, and then start working our way south along.
Just to remind you, Jay's Mill is way up here, okay? That's Winfrey Field, Brock Field, so he is withdrawn. And when he gets back, he orders this withdrawal back to this area. I'm talking Thomas now. Whereas the rest of the line, I guess the best thing you would say is it was rationalized. You know, it was made into a coherent defense.
This part of it, as we'll see, is anchored on a low rise of ground. And because there is a limitation on the number of troops available, they refuse or bend back, fold back the line at this point. And I'll show you why when we get up there. They wanted to continue south along the crest of this low rise of ground, but as John noted about Stuart's attack, when Stuart was repulsed that on the afternoon of the 19th, some of Stuart's men had ended up on the low rise of ground here, and they could not extend any further south, and so they then bend or fold it back to the west and cross the road with the line and run south parallel with the Lafayette Road before veering southwestward and turning this rise and the adjacent hill into position for Sheridan's division on the morning of September the 20th, which will necessitate Rosecrans moving his headquarters further to the north along the telegraph line. When you view the Union line in general on the morning of September the 20th, like this, when you view it from south to north, that line looks something like a question mark. Yeah. No, the Union Army did not turn to page 473 in Volume 3 of Casey's Tactics and take up the question mark formation. There is not such in Casey's Tactics. But for us to have a visual picture of the Union line, you can think of it as a question mark. And in many ways, we're going to think about it in terms of the curved part of the question mark and the shaft of the question mark. The curved part is bowed around the Kelly Field, as we'll see, and then the shaft of it is along the Lafayette Road. And we'll see what's going to happen with those. The weakest thing for the Union Army is that after the Council of War is over, William Stark Rosecrans did not get sleep. He came out into the yard here of the Widow Glens and paced until shortly before dawn, when he got on his horse and rode north along the developing battle line. Rode north along the developing battle line. Remember that. What? Chattanooga. Right? No, riding north along your developing battle line should tell you what? Where the troops are, right?
Oh, well, yeah.
Okay. That's going to become a question a little bit later on. So what's he already done this morning? Ridden along his line. Troop the line. But he mounts his horse. He paced until shortly before dawn, when he rode north to meet with George Thomas.
Now, in contrast, and very briefly, Mr. Bragg. Mr. Bragg has a plan. It's the same plan. You know, attack from the north and sweep the Union Army to the southwest into the Macklemore's Cove and everything down there. So what he does is he knows that now that Longstreet is coming, so he has Polk. Longstreet's not there yet. Polk shows up at his headquarters and he tells Polk, okay, we're going to attack in echelon from our right to our left, from the north to the south, and you're on the right, so you're going to do that. And Hill and Walker are going to be under you. However, neither Hill nor Walker finds this out that night. Okay, they're sitting there. What's going to happen? Longstreet shows up at midnight.
Bragg's asleep.
Yeah. So Bragg gets up and says, "You're going to be in charge of the left wing of the army, and you have Buckner's guys, and you have Hood's guys working for you on the left, and we're all going to attack at dawn,
from right to left."
Right. Starting at the top of the question mark and going down. Well, that was his plan. Longstreet had never been here before. Well, actually, he was a Georgia boy. He might have been through here, but he didn't know the terrain. He didn't know the troops, except for his, you know, the one division under Law.
Only 5 of the 17 brigades Longstreet commands on the 20th are his own.
Right.
The other 12 are all new to him.
Right. So he's looking at this. He doesn't know where anything is. He doesn't know where anybody is. So he's trying to scratch, but at least he's got a little time because the attack's starting north, right? But Polk goes back and gets a little sleep. Now, one of the points about Polk that we hadn't talked about, Polk was, in Civil War terms, an old man. He was Jefferson Davis's contemporary at West Point. He was 20 years Bragg's senior from graduating at West Point. Now, of course, he quit after 6 months and went to the ministry, but he still thought he was and should be senior to Bragg. That was part of the personality problem with him. Back then, seniority was everything. So anyway, so Polk goes back. He doesn't tell anybody. D.H. Hill wanders the battlefield looking for somebody to tell him what to do and can't find anybody. So we'll get into it, but as you might expect, the day-dawn attack, whatever day-dawn means, anyway, didn't quite come off at that time.
Now, where are we on this map?
On this map, we are here where Sheridan is shown. This becomes Sheridan's positions.
How did the telegraph line survive all of this? Is it heavily guarded or protected, or was it behind the lines?
No, they strung it in trees and the like. It's behind Union lines.
Oh, it's behind the lines.
Yeah.
Well, so, now Wheeler's cavalry, which you notice I haven't mentioned recently, was way down there. They made no contribution to the battle. They could have come up behind and really messed things up. They finally ended up, the only contribution they really made to the battle was, you remember those 7 hospitals at Crawfish Springs? They captured, at the end of the second day, or the third day really, they captured the hospitals. That's all Wheeler did for the whole thing. I really cannot explain how all that.
Yeah, when Bragg conceived this idea of moving north, trying to get between the Union Army and Chattanooga, he was afraid that Rosecrans might thrust beyond his left flank towards the railroad. And so he ordered Joe Wheeler to watch the left flank, to guard against that possibility. But that took his largest body of cavalry, 6,000 men, essentially out of the picture. At a time when he needed a faster moving strike force. Having a concern about Rosecrans maybe thrusting his cavalry beyond his left flank would be valid, but the floor of the Great Valley of the Appalachians is rippled by ridgeline after ridgeline after ridgeline, particularly Taylor's Ridge, which you go through at Ringgold on I-75. It's a significant terrain feature. I wonder if Bragg might not have been better off sacrificing one division and putting brigades and regiments in the gaps on Taylor's Ridge and say, this is a die-in-place mission. Nobody in blue gets beyond this ridge line to our line of communication. So he could have that body of cavalry to then help facilitate. How much easier would the 18th have been if there had been more than Nathan Bedford Forrest himself at Reed's Bridge?
And during the battle, at this time right now, well, at this time, say tomorrow morning battle time, when the right flank is collapsed, people are running, totally disorganized. The Union right collapsed. What a target for cavalry divisions sweeping up.
The old Napoleonic use of cavalry.
That's right.
You break the line with the artillery and the infantry, and then you send the heavy cavalry in with their dragoon sabers, lopping heads off as they ride through.
The panic would have been indescribable. You know.
And I've done this some, and I've been thinking more and more about it, about creating this kind of charter graph of all these different assets. Does Bragg use the assets of his army that are available to him in the way best to achieve his objective? And Wheeler's cavalry is good evidence that he does not.
How far away did Wheeler get?
Well, Wheeler's going to capture the hospitals at Crawfish Springs, which is from here about 3.5 miles to the side.
I heard one kind of, I don't know if it was slanders, but he went fair out by Holly in Alabama.
Oh, well, now that's Wheeler's raid in October, and he's going to... world's largest bureaucracy. We loaned 119 a rock onto which they have carved the Union crest and Rock of Chickamauga and the like. It's out in front. And they teach the heritage to the trainees. Well, every time I go to Fort Moore, just this week to teach at WinSec, I always make a point of going by 119's headquarters to check on the rock that we have on loan with them. So, in fact, I even have pictures of that, and I'll show later on. I'll show you the pictures.
Okay, now we are at the point of the question mark. Let me turn this upside down because we are right here. Now, that road over there is the road that's on the map, but we are on the side road over here.
Yeah, this is the Battle Line Road, which I said the visitors beat into the landscape and the Park Commission then created.
Okay, you've actually got a double line here, and you've got artillery, plus you've got an entire reserve artillery park in that field with ammunition right behind it. This is even though it doesn't look like a wonderful defensive position, it has been developed into an extremely strong position.
And the line bends or folds back right here off the crest of the low rise, because at the time of the Civil War, a large cedar glade, which is only in remnant today, stretched north here. And by bending the line back here at the south end of the cedar glade, these troops on the left have got fields of observation and fields of fire into that cedar glade for a mile to the north. And the 4th Indiana Battery is right down there, capable of firing up that open grounds.
Okay, first thing in the morning, you have Confederate divisions spaced out here. But what's going on? Nothing. Nothing's happening. Except Longstreet down here, now he's got some light, he can start organizing the left wing. Polk has yet to talk to his subordinate commanders, okay? And finally, he does talk to Breckinridge, because Breckinridge hunted him up.
Actually slept at Polk's headquarters that night.
So Breckinridge is going to lead the attack. He's going to be on the right flank over here. But D.H. Hill, who has the units here, doesn't know about it. And in fact, when Bragg finally gets exasperated and comes up there, D.H. Hill still doesn't know that he is supposed to be under Polk and this was a major attack. And he has told his people, sit in position and eat breakfast.
Which they needed to do because they were 24, 36, or 48 hours since their last meal, and the food for September the 19th arrived at dawn on the morning of September the 20th.
So that's what's going on. And when Bragg finally locates Polk and pushes and everything pushes together, it takes, now at dawn, if I remember correctly,
dawn's about 6.
Yeah, somewhere around 6.
Day dawn, beginning of nautical twilight, as we would know it today, is about 5:30.
The attack finally kicks off 9:30 in the morning, giving all these people all the daylight in the world they need to set up their defense. Now, remember, it was going to be an echelon attack. You had Breckinridge, Cleburne, Cheatham, Stewart, supposed to go one after the other like this. Liddell and the rest of Walker was supposed to be in reserve back here, and they were. They weren't committed immediately. So I'm going to flip this over. Here's Breckinridge's attack right here.
Actually turned it upside down, so.
Well, I guess I was trying to kind of orient, but yeah, you can orient it
is.
Yeah. Okay, so what you've got here, we're up here, okay? Breckinridge is actually outflanking the Union position. Now, there are a couple of regiments that have been put out there as basically pickets to the north. And you can question why they didn't more strongly man that way, but they chose not to do that. So anyway, 2 brigades of Breckinridge can sweep around this way. But Helm's brigade,
which is
should be right there
and half there.
Yeah.
So.
But Helm's is the Kentuckians, okay? The Orphan Brigade. They are moving across this front right here. And then they turn and try to attack in here. And that part of the attack did not work well at all. It was a total failure, understandably so. Helm was related to somebody famous. Does anybody know?
Yeah.
He was Lincoln's brother-in-law. Yeah. He's mortally wounded right out there. Now the other 2 brigades gained some success. They penetrate to the south. Yeah, that's right, behind us, right back over here. But remember, everybody is double stacked down here. You've got all this artillery. These brigades come up from the second line and they push and push them back. And basically, Breckinridge makes no lasting impression. There's some confusion right here. And actually Forrest was over here. Some of Forrest's people actually joined the attack and come down here. They don't show it on the map here. But all of this is pushed away. Does not succeed. All right, Cleburne's division over here tries to follow, and they're back this way. They come up that little ridge they cannot make an impression either. Positions are too strong. Polk has one arrow left in his quiver then. He turns to Walker's Reserve Corps, which is behind, but he commits them piecemeal. He puts one brigade in here between Breckinridge and Cleburne and sends the other one around to reinforce that. And neither, the far flank, neither one of those is effective. So basically, a good portion of the Confederate Army, we're talking by this time 4 divisions and Forrest Cavalry, have expended themselves to a very great extent, beating their head against this strong position right here. Want to talk more about it?
Where should the weight of the Confederate Army have fallen on the morning of September the 20th? Somewhere in this area. But by deploying his army as he had ordered, but it didn't happen, in echelon, or all divisions on line, and then attacking an echelon by division from north to south, what weight does he have up here on his right opposite the Union left? Essentially none. And then, as John described, how do the divisions that do attack, how do they attack? Essentially piecemeal, separated from one another. And it's only part of Breckinridge's small division that gets back here behind the field, and there are plenty of Union reserves that send them to the rear. But imagine the crisis that this starts in the mind of Union leaders. Do they know that Breckinridge is only one small Confederate division? No. It might be what? The beginning of a massive all-out assault. What do you think George Thomas is screaming for? Reinforcements. And he's communicating to Rosecrans, and Absalom Baird and Richard Johnson and John Palmer are doing the same thing. Rosecrans is being bombarded with requests for reinforcements on the left. Do you think Rosecrans is under some stress? Yes. And what has he not done much of in the last week? Sleep. And when you deprive yourself of sleep, because who is it that normally deprives leaders of sleep? Themselves. What goes first? Your mind's ability to make judgments, your decision making. And this is all going to set up what we're going to see in just a minute. The timeline of what we're talking about here, as John noted, the Confederate attack finally begins at 9:30. How much stronger was this Union line at 9:30 than at 5:30? But the Union attack, or the Confederate attack, begins at 9:30. The high water mark of that part of Breckinridge's division that gets into the field there, the north end of the Kelly Field, is at 11 o'clock. This timeline is about 15 minutes ahead of the timeline that we are going to talk about down here next. One of the things I have never figured out in now 30 plus years of doing tours and staff rides here is how to get you all to remember that what we have just talked about here is happening just slightly ahead of what we're going to talk about down here.
Yeah, remember in echelon. Now, why did they do that? They didn't have good communications, right? So they said when the guy on your right steps off, you need to prepare to step off and step off right after that. So it was supposed to be boom, 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 like that. But of course it takes a while. What are the guys doing? You know, they're not sitting there waiting like this. They're lollygagging around until somebody takes charge and sees movement to the other side. So it takes an interval between units before it starts off. Now the 38th Indiana is in around this area, right
their
over
monument
here.
is right down here. We'll pass it in a moment.
Yeah. You had asked about the 38th Indiana. They're right. That was their position over there.
Great question.
So as I look at the maps and have read all this, it seems there was an opportunity for the Confederates to flood around to the north and just sit there.
That's a comment I made earlier.
Okay.
But they didn't. Bragg was stuck on the same paradigm.
Am I ready to be a general now?
No, well, how are you at building a team? That's Bragg's problem, is he cannot get Polk and Hill and Buckner and Walker to work as a team. And it's, you know, he's got the assets. The terrain actually favors him. He's got the numbers. There's a 10-mile gap between the Union Army and Chattanooga with almost no Union troops in it. If you can just bring your assets to bear at the right place, which means you've got to have subordinates who know what to do and then follow what your directions are.
If he could have put troops north, even pushing them towards Chattanooga, it would have forced Rosecrans to break his formation,
potentially,
to loosen it up.
Now at Chattanooga, you had Granger with a division and a brigade up there
at Rossville,
at the Rossville Gap.
Right, but I don't mean go all the way that far. Just threaten enough to cause a loosening of the line.
There is basically a 5-mile space between West Chickamauga Creek and the eastern lower slopes of Lookout Mountain. And what Bragg needs to basically do is fill up or get himself in that 5-mile space between West Chickamauga Creek on the east and Lookout Mountain on the west as a blocking force to prevent Rosecrans from getting back to Chattanooga, which would then theoretically force Rosecrans to have to withdraw back into the mountains, basically on one road. And that's why Bragg sees such opportunity here, because if he can drive Rosecrans against that wall of Lookout Mountain where there's only that one passageway, it would be like shouting theater in a crowded firehouse and having all those people rush towards the door to try to get out. You'd have a stampede. Bragg's got a tremendous opportunity here if he can just get his subordinates to do what he wants.
And if he can understand it. I'm not sure that Bragg understood what the situation was on the field. In the middle of the night, he moved up to that Bragg's headquarters that y'all saw down that way. And so now nobody knew where he was either.
He's out of touch. But all of that is emblematic of that terrible relationship between himself and Polk and Hill and Walker and Buckner, and now James Longstreet is arriving, who thinks that that he knows about all this infighting. It's covered in the newspapers in tremendous detail. Longstreet says, "Oh, I'm ready to be an Army commander. I'll go out west and President Davis will make me an Army commander."
Yeah, he thought he was going to replace Bragg, particularly after the battle, and they were unable to destroy Rosecrans' army.
I'm worried about that.
Okay, that's the Brotherton cabin in front of you, Brotherton Field right here. So about 11, well, a little before 11, you can see the Union line is very strong in this area, appears to be very strong. They sent out a patrol to see what was on the other side of the woods, and the road in the woods. They found out that, guess what? The woods were full.
Lots of Confederates.
Yeah, a lot of butternuts standing over there in the woods.
The one-armed colonel of the 100th Illinois, I'm told to put the skirmish line on the fences on the Lafayette Road. He's too aggressive. He pushes into the woods on the other side. And in fact, he is so aggressive, some of the Confederates say, "We were attacked
Well, what's going on is Longstreet has had up until 11 to organize, okay? Now, what he does, partly on purpose, partly by accident, he ends up attacking in a column formation. Leading is Bushrod Johnson, our old friend. He's sitting over there in the woods, and he is leading this attack. He has Hyman's division to his left. He's got Law's division behind him, and Kershaw, coming from the Army of Northern Virginia, finally has some troops on the ground behind that. Preston is back there, but he's not really committed yet into this attack. But the defense looks solid, right? But there's a problem, okay? What really, as I understand what really happened, is an aide to General Thomas comes down and tells the division commander, Brannan, I need you. And Brannan worked for that commander, okay?
Thomas thinks Brannan is still in reserve.
That's right.
Which is where Thomas last saw Brannan.
So Brannan has been ordered by this young captain to move north to join and reinforce Thomas. But then the captain goes and tells Rosecrans that he just had Brannan move. But meanwhile, Brannan and the division commander next to him, Reynolds, talk about this and say, that doesn't make any sense. I am holding part of this division, so he stays there. But Wood, next down, is in good position until Rosecrans has an order sent to Wood, because remember, Rosecrans rode the line. He knows where everybody is, right? He says, close up and support Reynolds. Now, what does close up and support mean? That actually means two different things, guys. Close up means, you know, left face and march that way until you reach him. Support means pull out of the line and go behind him.
Here's the actual order.
Yeah, the General Commanding directs that you close up on Reynolds
as fast as possible and support him.
So Wood was confused, but unfortunately for all concerned, he had already been chewed out for not obeying orders very recently. So he asked Crittenden, who happened to be walking around here, and Crittenden, or no, McCook, who happened to be walking around here, and said, and McCook says, well, if those are your orders, you need to obey them. So guess what? These three brigades pull out of line and start heading back that way to loop around and get behind Reynolds, because Wood knows that Brannan is right here. So to support Reynolds and close up on him, he's got to go back behind there.
And McCook said, I'll take care of getting Davis's reserve brigade on the front line, and I'll get the head of Sheridan's division to move this way to take your place. And that's how Rick McCook winds up at Libel to be talking to Libel when the stuff hits the fan here. So
and 10 minutes after these guys move out, what happens? Longstreet's attack kicks off.
Where's the power punch of the Confederate Army?
Right. Bushrod Johnson comes roaring right through there. Now, Johnson actually keeps moving. He keeps going straight back. But some people peel north and engage Brannan and Reynolds up that way. And Hindman to the left pours in and pushes down this way. They are rolling up the whole line because they were able to penetrate this gap. Now the attacks to the north didn't work out that great. They got up there into a field, they got across the field, and then ran into some heavy fire and had to pull back. But to the south, and I'll go ahead and cover that because we're not going down there. We don't have time to go down there. But down to the south, Hyman goes down there and catches Davis. Davis has a fairly small division. He's caught, he is dispersed. Sheridan has received the order to come up and reinforce. He's on the move, and Hyman tears him apart. You've got two divisions suddenly running west. And they are out of, they're totally disorganized. Two Union divisions are moving out. Wilder tries to do something. He organizes. He wants to come forward and attack across the penetration. It does not work out for him, and he keeps organized, but he goes the same way.
And caught up in the collapse of Davis and Sheridan are Rosecrans, McCook, and Crittenden. And they'll all three be swept from the field with those fragments, some of whom are indeed their morale is broken. They are heard to shout, "I will see you on the other side of the Ohio," meaning that river up there at Louisville and Cincinnati. Yes, sir.
So, if the unit that was here, if they had stayed in place, were the Confederates strong enough to have punched through anyway, or?
Hard to tell.
Yeah.
Were they aware of the gap, or did they get lucky that the gap?
They got lucky.
They got lucky.
Absolute luck.
They got absolute luck. Yeah, pure dumb luck. Now, there are James Longstreet fans who want to have Longstreet over there behind that big pine tree, peering around the edge of it and saying, "Oh, there's a gap. Come on, boys. We're going through the gap." No. But remember, what did John start off with? What did I add to? What has Francis Bartleson done? He's pushed the Union skirmish line into the woods on the other side of the road. There is not a single Confederate soldier on the face of the earth who could see this gap open unless there was a wounded man from Stewart's division the day before laying out here in this field, but he had no way of telling anybody over there what was going on. It is pure dumb luck. And see, they charge through the lines.
Okay, Richard, you asked about Thomas Wiseman, 41st Tennessee. Okay, 41st Tennessee was one of the ones that, out of Johnston's division, that swung north, but then went west all the way across the other side of Dyer Field. Okay. That's part of Bushrod Johnson's people.
They're in Gregg's brigade, which is, part of it is on the front line and part of it is in supports.
Right. And Bob Slimp, the 48th Alabama, was in the third wave in this column that was attacking. So what they did was they turned north and kind of held a gap between Polk's people and Longstreet's people, but they were not heavily engaged during this area right here.
This is Law's brigade, which is doing its mid-war thing of wandering aimlessly on battlefields, which is how they wind up on the slopes of that rocky knoll outside that small South Central Pennsylvania college town. It's how they're going to wind up wandering around at the Wilderness in May of 1864. So.
And they're split out.
Yep.
And the different places. But at any rate, that was the deciding moment of the battle. That occurred when Wood decided to obey that order and start pulling out, and there was no defense right here.
Wood only did that in consultation with McCook.
Right.
Wood had an encounter with Rosecrans that morning, but Wood is not acting spitefully like some language made up in the 1930s, which says, Wood said, "I hold the fateful order of the day in my hand and would not part with it for $5,000. That language is made up in the 1930s.
Yeah.
Now, pro-Rosecrans partisans will try to shift the blame to Wood after the battle. But Wood will demand a court of inquiry, and his conduct here is upheld, and he will fight on this field until dark on the 20th, and have a long career in the regular U.S. Army after the war, even though he was herniated when his horse was shot and killed on Snodgrass Hill, and as the horse fell head first, he was thrown against the pommel of the horse, and he suffered from that hernia the rest of his life. He did not leave the field after that injury on September the 20th.
Now, just to reprise, Bushrod Johnson went this way. Law behind him comes this way, and we'll talk about Law a little more. Hyman's division goes down there and cleans the board in that direction right down there. So you've got Law, you've got Johnson and Law and Hyman here. Preston doesn't get involved until much later in the afternoon. We'll talk about him later. Kershaw doesn't get involved until after the breakthrough because they're in the back, and we'll talk about them in a little while. Okay? But this was the key point right here.
This is where the battle turns. Not because anybody did anything decisive, positive. It happens because of errors and luck.
That's right.
And
errors on one side, luck on the other.
Yep. And who is responsible for this disaster that is now befalling the Union Army of the Cumberland? One man, William Stark Rosecrans. And what has he not done? Slept. Not taking care of himself.
And he's also not worked with his subordinates. He should have worked through the Corps commander, who could have possibly informed him about what the real position was down here.
That order goes from Army Command to Division Command. There's no evidence that he attempted to communicate that to McCook, but it should have gone Rosecrans, McCook, Wood. He's tasked his Chief of Staff, Brigadier General James A. Garfield, with keeping track of where all Union units are in the battlefield. He did not consult Garfield. He's ridden the line 2.5 times that morning. It's all evidence of his stressed condition and his fatigued and mentally exhausted state.
And also his distrust of McCook to a certain extent. He didn't trust McCook to do McCook's job down here.
Look at Stones River. Look at Perryville.
So he was clear off on one wing.
I'm sorry?
McCook was clear off on one wing.
Well, but at Stones River, McCook is supposed to hold the right flank. But he was not ready when Bragg attacks and rolls up the right flank. So, yeah. And
you can only blame him though after the fact.
And well, but that's 9 months before Chickamauga. And Rosecrans had made a concerted effort in the spring of 1863 to get some other people as Corps commanders. But Halleck and Stanton didn't approve Rosecrans' request for others to be Corps commanders in his army. Rosecrans briefly had Schofield, and then Schofield got taken away from him.
One of the things that happened in the background too, Rosecrans used to work for Grant in Mississippi. All right, the Battle of Iuka, Rosecrans was left carrying the pail, and that was where the acoustic shadow happened. Grant didn't know what was going on. They had Van Dorn, and they didn't get him. Well, Grant blamed Rosecrans, and ever afterwards he was bad-mouthing Rosecrans. Dana was sent down as a spy on Grant during Vicksburg. And Dana was co-opted by Grant, is the best way to say it. And so Grant was getting great reviews from Dana. And he also absorbed Grant's attitude towards Rosecrans.
And then Stanton sends Dana here to spy on Rosecrans. And Rosecrans, like Grant, saw Dana exactly as the spy that he was, but Rosecrans was not the savvy politician that Ulysses S. Grant was, and Rosecrans, instead of saying, like Grant did, Assistant Secretary of War Dana, welcome to my headquarters, I want you in my council. Grant co-opted Dana. Rosecrans treated him like the devil, and kept him at arm's length. And so, even from the porch of the Widow Glens, Charles Dana is sending nasty grams to Washington, D.C. Why does Stanton want to get rid of Rosecrans? He's been successful. And what are people in Ohio talking about Rosecrans as in 1864? A presidential candidate. And Stanton is afraid that if that baboon that he works for, and Stanton called Lincoln a baboon, Stanton was afraid that if Lincoln is not reelected, where's that going to lead? Or even not renominated. And remember, that came real close because the Republican Party in 1864 was not the Republican Party. That's how bad the Republican Party stank in the North at that moment. They renamed themselves the Union Party. Stanton was afraid he would be left out in the cold.
So, isn't it amazing how all that backroom politics?
Well, you have never heard that politics has affected a military operation, have you?
Okay. I kind of gathered that McCook was part of the fallout.
Yes, McCook will be part of the fallout, mainly because there will be a whole bunch of people who write to the newspaper that say, I was running from the battlefield for my life, but as fast as I was running, you should have seen General McCook go by me. And he and Crittenden will be done away with.
So I tend to think that
Okay, now remember I talked about the breakthrough. Here's Bushrod Johnson right here, breaking through right now. We are right here. Okay, see the field behind it, or to your left, and behind me, that's this big field right here. Bushrod Johnson breaks through, and he keeps going all the way over to this terrain feature, this ridge way over here,
which is beyond this first one, beyond those trees there, off in that direction.
And the reason he goes there, of course, is he's not supported any further, so he takes up a defensive position there initially. Law comes in here. The Union troops are retreating to the north. So immediately, Robinson turns and follows them. And he is pursuing, going that way. But what he does not realize is you got all the artillery up there, that's Union artillery, and you have units that are not running away up there. So Robinson's brigade is part of Law's division now, okay? And they kind of take out on their own and think that they can keep running, and they get a very bloody nose, and they come back in great disorder.
This is Hood's old Texas brigade.
I was going to ask if anybody knew that.
They are Texans. So why are they kind of running off like a wild hare? They're Texans. What has their fighting under Hood earned for them and Hood in 1862 in Virginia? This reputation as aggressive fighters. And now they see Yankees retreating everywhere, and what do? Go chasing after them until
they come running back. And Hood, his headquarters is back right directly behind you where all those cannonballs are stacked. He comes riding out here, right up there, less than 100 yards that way. Bang. He's a corps commander now, right? He's got Bushrod Johnson under him, he's got Law under him, and a follow-up of Kershaw is going to be under him. But what happens? He loses, eventually loses a leg. He's gravely wounded right up there, loses a leg eventually, and has to take a while to recover. So, guess what? Bushrod Johnson just became a division commander less than a week ago. Law took over from Hood at Gettysburg 3 months ago. Kershaw took over from McLaws, and I don't remember exactly when, but sometime between those 2 dates. So you had 3 division commanders who were really fighting their first full battle as division commanders. Nobody took over the Corps.
Johnson and Kershaw will encounter one another, and they will have a date of rank check on the battlefield. And the junior, Kershaw, convinces the senior, Bushrod Johnson, that he, the junior Kershaw, is senior to Bushrod Johnson. In the end, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Because they're going to get so scattered, Kershaw's going to get pinned down, that, as John intimated, Hood's Corps now is leaderless. Yep. Those 3 divisions have no leadership.
No coordination whatsoever. So when Kershaw gets here, he actually goes that way. See that monument up there on the top of the hill? That's the South Carolina monument. That's Kershaw's monument. He had South Carolinians in his brigade. The Union force has consolidated on Snodgrass Hill right there and Horseshoe Ridge to the west. They are defending in strength. So what happens? Kershaw takes his division up there, gets knocked off, and they have to come back. Then, let's see, who was next? I think Kershaw tried it twice before.
Well, Kershaw will launch 3 assaults.
Yeah, but the third one was with Johnson, right?
Well, yes, they're kind of simultaneous. And then Johnson's division attacks next.
Right.
And they'll make several attacks. And then Hindman's division arrives, and they'll launch several attacks.
And meanwhile, the division from Granger's Corps that was all the way up there at Rossville has come down right past the right flank of the Confederate Army, kind of had to bypass a little bit through the woods, and has reinforced at the end of that ridge. So there's brand new troops who have not been in battle in the last couple of days on the right, on the federal right facing south. So you really have at Snodgrass Field up there, you've got a very strong position that Thomas moved troops over to hold that. So you actually had an extremely strong line all the way across from straight ahead here, all the way up and down that way, a full ridge.
And we'll see that more specifically in just a minute when we get up there.
Right.
Any of you all who survived the Snodgrass Hill Fitness and Assault Walks.
Well, we're not going to do that. I've done it. We are on Snodgrass Hill. Okay, we've climbed the hill here, and out that way you can see Horseshoe Ridge. It keeps going a good distance that way. These are actually kind of extensions of Missionary Ridge to a certain extent, where it kind of falls into more pieces. So anyway, here's the Snodgrass Hill, or Snodgrass cabin. We're up here at the high ground. So we're sitting here in Stanley's brigade, and we got Croxton, Beatty, which is Brandon's division, and this is only at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Okay. Remember, the breakthrough happened at 11 over there at Brotherton Cabin. By 1 o'clock, the assaults are going here. Well, we had, remember, the first assault was actually Robinson almost immediately, and he got pushed back. So you had Humphreys coming into the field over here, and they got pushed back. The rest of Kershaw trying to climb that hill coming up here. Okay? And Johnson is further out that way, but they aren't involved in the very first attack up here. At first they're still staying there, and then they coordinate and get with the attack. So that was the first series of attacks right there. All right. Then Johnson gets into the act. So again, we're right here. Johnson attacks out there on the flank, right here, way out there. But coincidentally, now coincidence is favoring the Union, Steedman's division comes trotting up, not up the road, but a little further over, right up there, and reaches this high ground first. So it's 2 brigades versus 2 brigades. And the guys sitting on the high ground, they won that one too. Okay? So that was their attack. Kershaw is stuck down there in that ravine. And you got part of Hindman coming in right here. Okay, that occurs between 2 and 2:30 in the afternoon.
Where were we in the clearing where we just came from?
All right, we were down here.
Yeah, off the bottom of that map.
Okay? All right, so yeah, what we did is we came up this road and turned left here and went around like that, and we're now up here. Okay, so now 3 to 3:30, semi-coordinated attack. Kershaw, some of Hyman's guys, and Johnson. Still no go. Okay, and basically after that we had Gracie coming in, and Preston's division, which had been sitting down there not doing anything for a couple of days, finally gets committed as well. And by 4 o'clock then you see a reprise of this with some of these units pull back and the replacements coming in. Preston, the Hilliard Legion comes in here. I think Hilliard was actually right up that way.
Right. Actually, the center of the brigade comes right here.
Oh, right here?
Yeah, right
okay.
Here. Yep.
All right, so this is it. You can take the picture right here, John.
Okay.
But finally, Hilliard gets a toehold right.
And that, unfortunately, was the point when our camera's battery and backup battery had both run out of power. It was somewhat appropriate that our battery ran out of juice on Snodgrass Hill, because just like the Union Army holding that ground, you could say we had run out of ammunition and were forced to retreat. So if you want to know how the Battle of Chickamauga came to a conclusion, you'll just have to visit the battlefield yourself. Thank you to all who attended our field trip, and a special thank you to our tour guides, John Scales and Jim Ogden. If you'd like more information on how you can join the Tennessee Valley Civil War Roundtable on future field trips, please check out our website at tvcwrt.org. The Tennessee Valley Civil War Roundtable is a nonpartisan, nonprofit educational organization which seeks to develop a deeper, informed understanding of the issues, personalities, and events of the Civil War. Our goal is to learn, understand, and communicate the history of the American Civil War. We hope you enjoyed this presentation of our field trip to Chickamauga and that you learned something new. Thank you for watching.